I bent down to kiss her cheek, the way I had every Sunday for years, when she pulled back ever so slightly. Her perfectly manicured nose wrinkled. "You smell like poverty," she said, smiling just enough for the other brunch guests to laugh, then pretend they hadn't. Before we start the story, tell me where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to subscribe. The sunlit dining room of Ryan and Chloe's Austin home buzzed with the gentle clink of champagne flutes and the low murmur of polite brunch conversation. The long farmhouse table gleamed under the weight of silver serving trays and artfully arranged fruit platters. Evelyn Hart stepped in from the foyer, her heels clicking softly against the reclaimed wood floor. At 72, she carried herself with the kind of posture that made people straighten their own backs without realizing it. Chloe rose from her chair, all honey blonde hair and curated elegance, her cream silk blouse catching the light. She leaned in for the obligatory air kiss, one cheek, then the other. Halfway through, she hesitated. Her manicured hand rested lightly on Evelyn's arm. Her nose wrinkled. "You smell like poverty." The words cut through the chatter like a dropped glass. A couple at the far end of the table glanced over. Someone gave a nervous chuckle. Another guest busied herself with pouring more coffee. Ryan, standing beside his wife, gave a tight smile but said nothing. He'd always been conflict-averse, a man who thought silence was a peacekeeping tool. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly on her clutch, but her expression never faltered. "Good morning to you too, Chloe," she said, her voice smooth as cream. Chloe released her arm with a tinkling laugh, the kind that was meant to sound light, but instead dripped with triumph. She slid back into her seat, a sparkling bracelet catching the light as she gestured for Evelyn to sit beside her. The charm dangling from it was unmistakable. A tiny silver circle engraved with the stylized initials M.A., Maison Argent. Evelyn had seen the brand's ads in glossy magazines, pale-faced models in black and white, a single bottle of perfume gleaming in color. Exclusivity wrapped in glass. The rest of brunch unfolded with practiced politeness. Chloe dominated the conversation, dropping brand names like pearls. Evelyn let her talk, only occasionally answering when addressed directly. She'd been in enough boardrooms to recognize a power play when she saw one, and this was the domestic equivalent. Dominance established through the tiniest of cuts. The air was fragrant, citrus from the mimosas, butter from fresh croissants, and under it all, the heady floral musk of whatever Maison Argent scent Chloe had chosen that morning. It clung to her like armor. When plates were cleared, Chloe offered Evelyn coffee, her tone syrupy. "Perhaps this will help, Evelyn." Something warm Evelyn met her eyes over the rim of her teacup. "I've always preferred my drinks, and my company, warm, dear." It was subtle, but Chloe's smile stiffened. The conversation turned to travel plans, art gallery openings, and mutual acquaintances' missteps. Evelyn contributed sparingly, choosing instead to observe. She noted the way Chloe preened whenever someone asked about her accessories, how her fingers always drifted to the Maison Argent charm as if it were a talisman. When brunch wound down and goodbyes were exchanged, Chloe leaned in again for the farewell kiss. "Lovely to see you," she said, voice like spun sugar. "You too," Evelyn replied, then stepped into the afternoon sunlight without looking back. That night, in the quiet of her study, Evelyn sat before her mahogany desk. The house was still, the only sound the rhythmic ticking of the French carriage clock on the mantel. She set aside the novel she'd been pretending to read and opened her laptop. She typed Maison Argent into the search bar. The brand's website was sleek, draped in muted golds and creams. She clicked through images of perfume bottles, press clippings, and glowing testimonials. A second search pulled up business filings, something most customers would never think to look for. Maison Argent was privately held, headquartered in New York. Majority shares split between 3 entities. One of them, she saw, had been reducing its holdings over the past year. She clicked deeper, tracing corporate structures and cross-referencing directors' names. The financial reports showed signs of strain: high marketing costs, declining margins, a need for capital infusion. Not in trouble yet, but vulnerable. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. She leaned back in her leather chair, fingers steepled. Some women might have written a cutting remark on social media or avoided future brunches altogether. Evelyn preferred quieter, sharper tools, the kind that left no fingerprints but permanent marks. She copied the company's ownership structure into a private folder. Her mind was already turning over the possibilities, like a jeweler rotating a gem under the light. If Chloe thought Maison Argent was her crown, Evelyn was already picturing herself holding the scepter. She bookmarked the filings and whispered to the empty room, "Let's see who really owns your scent." Then she began drafting an email to an old friend, her attorney, Marta Alvarez. The morning light in Evelyn's study came in clean and bright, slicing across the leather blotter and turning her silver pen into a line of fire. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that made decisions sound louder in her head. She had slept well, not out of peace, but out of purpose. Her laptop woke with a soft chime. Evelyn returned to the filings she'd bookmarked the night before, moving with the calm patience of someone who'd spent decades reading balance sheets like diaries. The numbers told the real story. People were just footnotes. Maison Argent was smaller than its aura suggested. Mid-sized masquerading as massive, its glamour built on margins and marketing. Revenue steady, but not growing. Ad spend ballooning. Inventory turns slowing. Luxury fragility wrapped in frosted glass. She traced ownership through shell entities the way one follows a scent through a crowded room. There it was. Argent Holdings BV, the second largest shareholder, decreasing its position over the last 3 quarters. Not an exit yet, but a direction. Another entity's debt covenants were tightening. If a whisper of liquidity could turn to a shout, the balance might tilt. She took a sip of Darjeeling, the tannins bright and floral. This wasn't revenge. This was an acquisition thesis with a bow. Evelyn clicked open her email and drafted a single line to an old friend. Subject: discreet inquiry, body, Maison Argent. Need a read. Call me. She hit send. The phone rang 6 minutes later. Marta, Evelyn said, allowing warmth to enter her voice. Tell me I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing. Marta Alvarez's laugh crackled through the speaker. You're seeing a brand that spends like it's LVMH and books, like it's a boutique. How motivated are we? Motivated enough to make Chloe's charm bracelet obsolete. A beat? Then Marta's tone shifted from amused to surgical. Here's the short version. One of their backers is sick of writing checks. If we create a credible buyer through a holding company, with clean capital and a tight diligence window, we could close fast. How fast? You could own the company within a month. Evelyn allowed herself a small private exhale. Make it happen. Anonymous? Marta asked. Of course. Evelyn glanced at the bookshelves. First editions, signed. Call it Blue Bonnet Lark LLC Delaware. My name nowhere near it done. I'll start with a soft touch to Argent's banker. We'll need a VDR opened, but I can get us under NDA by tomorrow. A pause. Evelyn, this is elegant. That's the point, Evelyn replied. Velvet gloves, steel wrists. She hung up and began a list, the way only she could. Clean bullet points in a fountain pen, ink drying like decisions. Confirm Argent cap table and board composition. Identify pressure points. Expiring exclusivity contracts, supply chain exposure, grass absolutes, labdanum, map margin improvement, SKU rationalization, PR repositioning, heritage angle. Keep Ryan out of it. Keep Chloe very out of it. By mid-afternoon, Marta's emails began landing one after another like precise taps on crystal. Marta, NDA draft attached. Marta, banker receptive. Seller, open to conversations. Marta, VDR credentials incoming. Debt schedule looks negotiable. Evelyn opened the data room and moved through folders with the ease of a seasoned hunter. Sales underscore, buy underscore fragrance. Marketing underscore, ROI underscore, Cutorly. Lease obligations, influencer spend. The findings made her smile. Half pity, half opportunity. They were paying 6 figures to influencers who couldn't sell out a trunk show, and they had 3 overlapping white floral SKUs cannibalizing each other on the same shelf. All sillage, no strategy. She toggled to social listening dashboards Marta's analyst had included. Mentions spiked around Maison Argent Étoile, the very scent Chloe practically baptized herself in. Sentiment, high but shallow. Loyalists, yes. Diversified base, no. A perfect lever. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Marta. Majority holder wants speed and silence. If we show proof of funds and a respectable governance plan, they'll lean our way. Evelyn swiveled her chair toward the window. Outside, an Austin breeze moved the live oaks, sunlight flickering like a heartbeat. She could already see the moves. Retire a hero SKU with a limited archive farewell. Pivot messaging from glossy ingenue to heritage luxe. Collapse ad spend bloat, and carve a founder's circle that answered to her. Her teacup was empty. She didn't notice until the porcelain clinked back onto the saucer. In the evening, she poured herself a single glass of champagne and stood by the mantel. A framed photo of Ryan as a boy, missing tooth, grass-stained knees, looked back at her. Chloe hadn't married into poverty. She'd married into power and mistaken it for silence. Evelyn's phone chimed again. This time, Instagram. Chloe had posted a photo, a mirrored vanity crowded with frosted bottles and gold caps, a bouquet of white peonies artfully out of focus. Her caption was a weapon dressed as a wink. Queens wear argent. Evelyn enlarged the image with her thumb and forefinger. At the edge of the frame, she could just make out the tiny MA charm on the bracelet, glinting under soft light. She took a slow sip of champagne, tasting the crisp apple and toast. Then she smiled. Not the social one people expected, but the private smile of someone who had already chosen the board, the pieces, and the checkmate. She forwarded the post to Marta with 2 words. Game on. The private conference room at the Austonian's 54th floor smelled faintly of polished wood and old money. The kind of space where deals didn't just happen, they were sculpted. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, not because she'd asked, but because the seller's banker instinctively offered it to her. Marta sat to her right, her legal pad filled with her spidery handwriting, every line an action point or a trapdoor. Across from them, the representative from Argent Holdings Bvi smoothed his tie, eyes darting between the thick dossier in front of Evelyn and the slim Cartier on her wrist. He was the type who measured power by accessories. Evelyn preferred it by leverage. She opened the folder Marta had handed her earlier that morning. The numbers stared back. Debt maturities, unsecured liabilities, over-leveraged marketing commitments. But underneath the mess, there was muscle. The brand's core line still carried cachet in emerging markets, and their distribution agreements in Asia were barely tapped. "You're asking for 62, Evelyn said evenly, sliding one sheet toward him, but your debt schedule alone makes that a fairy tale. She tapped a red ink note in the margin. Bridge loan expires Q3. The banker shifted in his chair. That's our initial. I'm offering 50. Clean. No financing contingencies. Close within 30 days. Her voice carried the certainty of someone who'd buried bigger men with smaller words. He hesitated, then glanced at Marta, perhaps hoping for softness there. He found none. Marta's gaze was a scalpel. "You take this," she said, "or your next meeting will be with someone who read this file half as closely as she has." Silence stretched just long enough for Evelyn to hear the faint hum of the air vents. The city skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Austin's cranes and glass towers catching the sun. She could feel the weight shifting toward her. 55, he said finally. 52, Evelyn countered without missing a beat. And I want control of board appointments. That last clause landed like a pin dropped in crystal. Board control meant she could move pieces without asking permission, retire products, redirect budgets, even phase out a fragrance if she wanted. After another pause, he nodded slowly. 52 and the board. We have a deal. Marta's pen moved swiftly, ink scratching out the skeleton of the intent to buy agreement. Evelyn read every clause as if it were poetry, her fingertip tracing each paragraph. No personal name attached anywhere. Only Bluebonnet Lark LLC, the holding company Marta had set up, quietly domiciled in Delaware with a trust structure between. The papers slid toward her. Evelyn signed in smooth, confident strokes, the pen whispering across the page. Across the table, the banker extended his hand. Evelyn shook it lightly, not in triumph, but in confirmation. The deal wasn't a conquest. It was inevitability made real. That evening, her phone buzzed as she was watering the white orchids in her kitchen. Ryan's name lit up the screen. She let it ring once before answering. "Hey, Mom," he said in his usual easy tone. "Just checking in. Chloe's thinking of hosting another brunch in a couple weeks." "You free?" She smiled faintly at the orchids. "I'll let you know, dear." Her voice was warm, untouched by the fact that she had just secured the keys to his wife's social identity. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Everything's in motion," she replied, letting the pause stretch. They exchanged pleasantries, and when she hung up, Evelyn poured herself a measure of single malt, the peaty smoke curling into the air like a private celebration. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Marta's message. "Funds transfer confirmed. Seller's off the phone with his lawyer. In 2 weeks, you'll own her favorite scent." Evelyn stared at the words, savoring them like the first inhale from a newly uncorked bottle. 2 weeks until Chloe's bracelet was just jewelry, and her perfume just vapor. Evelyn set down her glass and murmured aloud to no one, "Let's see how poverty smells now." The scent hit Evelyn before she reached the entrance, a heady cloud of bergamot and jasmine, Maison Argent's signature. The boutique hotel's rooftop had been transformed into a glittering garden, fairy lights strung over marble tables, crystal flutes catching the golden glow of sunset. Waiters in black carried silver trays of champagne and amuse-bouches, the kind you could finish in a single bite, but remember for hours. Chloe stood near the centerpiece floral display, wearing a gold silk slip dress that caught the light with every movement. The crowd around her laughed at something she'd said. She spotted Evelyn and glided over, her perfume, leaving a shimmering trail in the air. "Evelyn," Chloe cooed, the greeting sugar-coated but brittle at the edges. "That navy suit is divine." "And you look radiant tonight," Evelyn replied, letting the compliment land with just enough warmth to seem sincere. Her eyes flicked briefly to the diamond-shaped logo charm on Chloe's bracelet, dangling above the veins in her wrist like a badge of rank. The party pulsed with soft jazz and polite laughter. Chloe moved through her guests like a seasoned hostess, pausing to kiss cheeks and drop names like rose petals. Evelyn watched her lean toward a well-known style blogger. "Oh, I know all the right people at Argent," Chloe said, voice pitched to carry just far enough. "They always send me the new releases before the press sees them." She let her hand drift to the perfume bottle displayed in the centerpiece, fingers brushing the glass like a lover's. "Pas chic." Evelyn sipped her champagne, the bubbles breaking against her tongue in crisp little bursts. She didn't need to correct the record. The truth would do that on its own. Soon. A tall man in a dove-gray suit stepped onto the terrace. Henri Duval, CEO of Maison Argent. His salt-and-pepper hair gleamed under the light, and his expression carried that faint air of Parisian disinterest, the kind that made people lean in for approval. He navigated the crowd, smiling and shaking hands, until his gaze found Evelyn. The barest flicker of recognition crossed his face, followed by a small nod, a private salute. Evelyn returned it with the faintest lift of her glass, the gesture so discreet it could have been mistaken for acknowledging the music. Chloe didn't see it. She was too busy posing for a group photo with 3 women in pastel cocktail dresses, tilting her chin just so to show off the bracelet charm. Evelyn took a seat at one of the small marble tables, letting the hum of the party swell and recede around her. She tasted the sharp salt of the smoked salmon canapé, felt the warmth of the setting sun on her cheek. Her patience was a muscle she'd trained for decades, in boardrooms, negotiations, and marriages. Tonight, she was letting it stretch. As she finished her second glass, a waiter passed with a tray of dessert bites, miniature lemon tarts dusted with gold leaf. Chloe intercepted him, laughing loudly to a guest about guilt-free decadence, her laughter carrying just a little too high. Evelyn wondered if she had any idea that the spotlight she basked in wasn't hers to keep. Evelyn's phone vibrated against the table. She glanced down, expecting perhaps a message from Marta or Ryan. Instead, it was a text from Henri. Transfer complete. Congratulations. The words glowed on the screen, stark and thrilling against the dimming sky. Evelyn slipped the phone back into her clutch without changing expression. She had just become the owner of the perfume on Chloe's skin, the name on her bracelet, the brag on her lips. Evelyn lifted her glass once more, murmuring into the rim, "Let her have her party." Tomorrow, the crown would be hers. The morning after the rooftop party, Austin wore its Sunday quiet, low light on glass towers, the tremble of heat already rising off Congress Avenue. Evelyn's study smelled faintly of lemon oil and paper when the courier arrived. He handed her a stiff, cream envelope stamped with an embossed M.A. she now had every right to use. Inside, the executed transfer documents. Her majority stake, held through Blue Bonnet Lark LLC, recorded and final. She skimmed the pages the way one inhales the top notes of a scent. Quickly first, then again, slower, until every facet revealed itself. Control of board appointments, veto on major marketing spend, final say on product life cycle, signatures where they needed to be, absences where they ought to remain. Her name was nowhere. Her power was everywhere. Her phone chimed. Henri, CEO. Board at 11. Branding review at noon? Evelyn. I'll be there. Quiet entrance. She changed into a slate sheath and a silk scarf the color of smoke, slid on low heels and walked out with the unhurried calm of someone who knows the elevators won't leave without her. Maison Argent's Austin office sat in a narrow building of glass and stone, lobby perfumed with a polite veil of white flowers and cedar. In the conference room, Henri stood when she entered, the deference subtle but unmistakable. "Madame Hart," he said, switching from French-accented English to something closer to respect. "Congratulations." "We won't use Madame in any document," Evelyn murmured, taking her seat. "But thank you." Marta dialed in from her office, voice clear over the speaker. "Board slate ready. Governance memo circulated. Your levers are in place." Henri slid a binder across the table. Mood boards, ad comps, campaign copy, models with gap-toothed grins floating in fields of fog. Perfume names that sounded like secrets rather than statements. "Pretty," Evelyn said, flipping pages. "And hollow." She set her palm on a board titled Étoile, Chloe's beloved scent. You have 3 overlapping white florals competing for the same vanity tray. Collapse them. Keep Étoile in limited archive next spring with numbered bottles and a charity tie-in. Then retire it. Henri's eyebrows inched up. Retire our bestseller? Bestseller among a narrow cohort we already own, Evelyn said. We need a spine, not a swarm. Shift the center to Heritage Luxe. Darker resins, aged woods, iris. Less ingenue, more heirloom. I'll take the campaign. Henri's pen paused mid-note. You will be the face? I will be the story, she corrected. Elegance with memory. Refinement that pays cash. She tapped the financials. Cut influencer spend by 40%. Replace with patron salons and museum partnerships. We build scarcity and lineage. The rest will chase us. Marta's chuckle slid through the speaker. And the retail experience? Evelyn's smile was delicate. Surgical. At the boutique level, introduce account hygiene. Credit privileges reviewed quarterly. Any customer with repeated returns or charge disputes? Flagged for in-store manager discretion. No public spectacle, just discreet friction. Henri understood. Death by velvet. Correction by velvet, Evelyn said. Death is for products that refuse to earn shelf space. They moved through the agenda in clean strokes. By the time the board votes were complete, all in her favor, courtesy of Marta's beautifully drafted consents, the room felt lighter, as if the very air had been decluttered. One more item, Marta said. Control instruments. We've formalized your unilateral authority to approve product discontinuations and appoint the creative director. It's embedded in the bylaws as founders' reserve rights, legally stout. I'm not the founder, Evelyn said. You smell like one, Marta replied, amused. Sign your initials on the addendum. Evelyn did, ink drying like a seal. She returned home at dusk, the sky a bruise of pink and violet. In the kitchen, she popped a half bottle of champagne and let the cork sigh against her palm. She poured a narrow flute and stood at the window while Austin glittered on cue. The first sip tasted like green apple and quiet victory. On the counter lay a small white box from the boutique, Étoile, the last allotted bottle from the local inventory, tagged for executive sample. She turned it in her hand, tracing the cut of the glass, the weight of the cap, Chloe's crown, reduced to a keepsake. Her phone buzzed twice. First, Marta. Marta. Control finalized. Board mechanics locked. If someone tried to reverse you, they'd break a wrist. Then, a second buzz. A name that made Evelyn's smile tilt. Chloe. VIP night at Maison Argent this Thursday. Private sale. Come with me. I can introduce you to the team. Wink wink, Evelyn let the message sit on the screen like a moth at the window. She drafted no reply. Instead, she set her glass down, lifted the Étoile bottle, and pressed the sprayer once into the air. The room filled with its bright, pretty arrogance, all lily and musk and the faintest whisper of sugar. It hovered for a breath, then thinned, then was gone. History, she said softly. Her phone chimed again, the formal invite this time, gilt font over ivory. Maison Argent, exclusive client event, VIP access. Chloe's note below it sparkled. Queens wear argent. Evelyn's fingers hovered over accept. The boutique's glass doors opened to the hush of chilled, perfumed air, a blend of bergamot, iris, and money well spent. Evelyn stepped inside first, the evening light still spilling gold across South Congress. She had chosen her moment carefully. 20 minutes before the official start, when the staff were still fussing over displays and no one could question her presence. A smiling sales associate handed her a crystal flute of champagne and a discreet black folder. Inside was the purchase list for the night, curated by her. A neat red asterisk marked one name, Chloe Hart. The note beside it read, in the manager's handwriting, account flagged. No in-store credit without executive approval. Evelyn signed her initials at the bottom without a flicker of hesitation. The boutique gleamed under white lacquered shelves, each bottle glowing like a jewel. She strolled past the center display, a tower of étoile bottles, each topped with a bow of satin ribbon. The last of their kind. She ran her fingers along the silk, remembering the boardroom vote that had sealed its fate. By the time she positioned herself near the entrance, she could hear the click of Chloe's heels on the sidewalk. They were fast, confident, the walk of a woman who believed the world had already been laid out in her size. Chloe breezed through the door in a body-hugging ivory dress and diamond studs that flashed under the track lighting. "Evelyn," she said in a tone meant to carry. "I didn't know you'd make it." "I wouldn't miss it," Evelyn replied, her smile polite but unreadable. Chloe swept past her toward the display, pulling 2 bottles into her crook of one arm and waving at the boutique manager. "I'll take these," she said, "and maybe one for my sister." The manager's expression softened into something rehearsed. "Mrs. Hart, there's a note on your account. I'm afraid your in-store credit is currently unavailable for this event." The words hung in the air like an uninvited scent. Chloe blinked. "That's impossible. I have a VIP line of credit." She glanced around, aware of the curious eyes of other shoppers. "Just run it again." "I'm sorry," the manager said, voice still velvet, "but the account is flagged pending review." "Of course you're welcome to pay by card." A blotch of color rose on Chloe's neck. Well, my cards are being handled. I wasn't expecting." She caught herself, straightened. "Never mind." Evelyn took a leisurely sip of champagne. "If it's a matter of timing, dear, I could cover it for you." Chloe's eyes flashed, a mix of pride and humiliation. "No, thank you. I'll manage." "Of course," Evelyn said smoothly. "I'm sure you will." While Chloe lingered awkwardly by the display, Evelyn walked forward and lifted a single étoile bottle from the last row. She turned it in her hand, admiring the cut of the glass before placing it gently on the counter. "This one. And please, wrap it as a gift." The manager's hands moved quickly, folding crisp black tissue into the Maison Argent box and tying it with a silver ribbon. Chloe watched the entire process, her lips pressed so tightly they nearly disappeared. Evelyn collected the package and finished her champagne in a slow swallow. "Enjoy the rest of the day." "Evening," she said, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the air was warmer, and the street hum of Austin nightlife began to build. Evelyn slid into the back seat of her car and placed the box beside her like a trophy. Her phone buzzed before they'd reached the first traffic light. A push notification from the Maison Argent press channel. Maison Argent announces discontinuation of Étoile Lean, limited quantities remaining. The press release image showed the same bottle Evelyn had just purchased, ribboned and glowing under soft light. She imagined Chloe inside, staring at the display like someone watching the tide pull away the last thing they thought they owned. Evelyn's eyes narrowed in satisfaction as she scrolled. At the bottom of the announcement, the fine print read, "Archival release scheduled for Spring Gala, by invitation only." She already knew whose name would not be on that list. By Monday morning, Chloe's Instagram feed looked less like a lifestyle account and more like a digital treasure hunt. Every other post was a frantic story. Screenshots of online perfume resellers, her fingers circling the dwindling number of Étoile bottles left in stock. Prices climbed with each refresh. $280, $350, $420. She hit Add to Cart on 3, only to have the page flash out of stock before her payment went through. She stormed through her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I need every boutique from here to Dallas checked," she told someone. A friend, maybe a personal shopper. "No, I don't care what they charge. Just get them. The call ended with a sharp sigh. From her window, she caught the shimmer of a familiar black box in the hands of her neighbor, who was showing it off to another woman on the sidewalk. The ribbon was silver. Étoile. Chloe's nails dug into her palm. By Tuesday, the whispers had started. A friend at her gym, sleek ponytail, sculpted arms, smirked when Chloe walked by. "Guess you'll have to find a new signature," she said, not even trying to lower her voice. Another chimed in. "It's the end of an era." Laughter followed Chloe into the locker room. Meanwhile, Evelyn was in her sunlit sitting room, pouring tea into bone china cups for two of her bridge partners. On the coffee table sat a discreet white bag from Maison Argent. She pulled out 3 small bottles of a fragrance so new it wasn't even in stores yet. Vertige de Soir, deep green glass with a gold stopper. "These are from the upcoming line," Evelyn said, her tone light, as though she'd stumbled upon them by accident. The women's eyes widened. They leaned in to sniff, their voices soft with envy. "No one else has these yet?" "Not until the launch," Evelyn replied, smiling into her teacup. By Friday, Chloe's bathroom counter had changed. Gone was the neat row of Étoile bottles. She'd hidden her dwindling supply in a locked drawer. In their place sat a cheaper designer knockoff she'd found at a department store. The bottle was the wrong weight, the cap too light. But it was better than nothing. Or so she told herself. At dinner that night, Ryan leaned across the table after kissing her cheek. "You don't smell like yourself anymore," he said, his brow furrowed. "Did you change perfumes?" Chloe forced a laugh. "Just experimenting." But the way he kept looking at her made her skin prickle. The shift was subtle, but brutal. At brunches, people no longer leaned in with a familiar, appreciative sigh. Friends stopped asking what she was wearing. A younger woman at a luncheon wrinkled her nose, then quickly masked it with a smile. Chloe told herself it was in her head. Deep down, she knew it wasn't. Late one night, still scrolling through secondary markets for Étoile, Chloe stumbled onto an article in a luxury business blog. Maison Argent's quiet leadership shift, holding company acquires majority stake. The headline didn't matter. It was the byline at the bottom that made her pulse jump. A single sentence listing the corporate details. There, in clean, bold type, was the name of the holding company. The same one that had recently purchased a certain historic Austin property, Evelyn's property. Her fingers hovered over the phone. She wanted to call Ryan. She wanted to call Evelyn. But mostly, she wanted to make sure she was wrong, because if she wasn't... Chloe's eyes narrowed as she reread the article. The name wasn't just familiar. It was Evelyn's. And Evelyn didn't just own her perfume. She owned her scent, her image, her identity. The pounding on Evelyn's front door rattled the beveled glass. It was an aggressive, impatient knock, the kind that didn't belong in her quiet Westlake neighborhood. Evelyn set her teacup down, straightened the silk collar of her blouse, and opened the door to find Chloe standing there, cheeks flushed and eyes bright with fury. "You!" Chloe snapped, brushing past her without waiting for an invitation. The cloying scent of her replacement perfume clung to the air, something sugary and cheap, already turning sour under the Texas heat. "You've ruined me," Chloe spat, spinning on her heels in the foyer. Her manicured finger jabbed the air between them. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Étoile was my signature, my identity, and now it's gone." Evelyn closed the door gently, letting the click of the latch stretch into silence. She took her time crossing the Persian rug to where Chloe stood, breathing heavily. "You mean the perfume?" Evelyn asked mildly, as if discussing the weather. "Yes, the perfume." Chloe's voice cracked, her outrage spilling over. "It's who I am. People knew me for it. And now I'm some nobody wearing knockoffs because you..." She stopped, searching Evelyn's expression for a reaction. There was none. Evelyn tilted her head, her eyes warm but impenetrable. Chloe, she said softly, you're mistaken about one thing. Chloe's jaw clenched. What's that? I didn't ruin your identity, Evelyn said. I simply reclaimed what you thought was yours. A flash of confusion crossed Chloe's face before Evelyn delivered it. The simple truth that landed like a stone in still water. I own Maison Argent. The silence that followed was almost musical. Chloe's mouth fell open, her breath hitching as she tried to form words. You... what? I bought it, Evelyn said, her voice steady, almost bored. The brand. The building. The formulas. Every last drop of that scent you used to wear. It's mine now. That's insane. Why would you? Evelyn stepped closer, her heels clicking against the marble. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. Poverty smells different from power, she said, each word deliberate. Now you know. For a moment, Chloe looked as though she might cry, her lower lip trembling. But instead she straightened, clutching the strap of her designer bag as though it were a lifeline. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door, her steps too quick, her posture too rigid to be anything but retreat. Evelyn didn't follow. She simply watched, her reflection framed in the glass as Chloe yanked the door open and disappeared into the blinding afternoon light. The house settled back into stillness. Evelyn poured herself another cup of tea, the steam curling upward like a private toast to herself. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen. Marta Alvarez. Evelyn answered on the second ring, her lips curving into a knowing smile before her friend even spoke. Ready to take it further? Marta's voice was low, conspiratorial, the perfect counterpoint to Chloe's earlier outburst. Evelyn swirled her tea and said, Further? I was just getting started. The silk scarf around Evelyn's shoulders fluttered slightly in the draft of the studio, but her expression never wavered. The photographer had asked for command without effort, and she delivered it in a single, precise glance into the lens. Under the warm lights, the Maison Argent bottle caught fire, gold reflections dancing across her perfectly manicured fingers. Chin just a touch higher, the photographer said softly, his voice reverent now. Evelyn adjusted. Not for him, but for the audience she knew was coming. The Heritage Luxe campaign was more than perfume. It was positioning. Marta had called it brand domination with lace gloves when she first pitched the idea. It's not about selling bottles, Marta had explained in their first strategy meeting. It's about making you the brand. Every street Chloe drives down, every boutique she walks into, your face will be there first. Evelyn's lips curled into the faintest smile. Then let's make it impossible to ignore. The shoot was designed like a portrait session for royalty. A set draped in deep emerald curtains. A grand armchair with carved lion's feet. The scent of white gardenia diffused into the air. The new flagship fragrance. Evelyn wore a tailored cream suit, pearls at her throat, and the same diamond brooch she'd once worn to her wedding anniversary dinner. The creative director adjusted the lighting and stepped back. Perfect, he murmured. We're selling heritage here, not hype. When the campaign launched, Austin woke up to her. Billboards on Congress Avenue, bus stop panels in front of Chloe's favorite salon. A towering display outside the luxury mall where Chloe did most of her shopping. Evelyn's profile, elegant, timeless, alongside the tagline, "Some things never go out of style." By noon, her phone was pinging nonstop. Just drove past you on 6th Street. Absolutely stunning. You're the Argent lady? Why didn't you say anything? Whole town's talking about this campaign, Evelyn. You've reinvented yourself. Fashion blogs ran side-by-side comparisons of the younger models Argent had used in the past versus Evelyn's poised image now. Social media posts raved about the refreshing glamour of featuring a woman with lived experience and confidence. Chloe couldn't escape it. She stopped posting her usual OOTD photos on Instagram. The weekly charity luncheons she once dominated became rarer appearances. Evelyn heard through the grapevine that Chloe had started declining invitations from certain friends. The same friends who had posted selfies with Evelyn's billboards in the background. One afternoon, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a call from Ryan. "Mom," he started cautiously, "you've made your point." Evelyn let silence stretch between them, savoring the faint sound of him shifting uncomfortably. "Oh, Ryan," she said finally, her voice soft but unyielding. "I'm not finished." Because this wasn't just about perfume anymore. It was about reshaping the room, every room, so that Chloe could never again enter one without seeing Evelyn already there. Evelyn swirled the wine in her glass that night, already outlining the guest list for the next Argent event. This time, Chloe wouldn't just see her face on billboards. She'd see it at the head of her social circle's table. The ballroom glowed like poured gold. Chandeliers dripped light onto crystal glasses, the low hum of a string quartet drifting over the steady rhythm of conversation. Every detail, from the scent of the floral arrangements to the label on the wine, had been chosen with surgical precision. Evelyn had not merely planned a party, she had curated a social coup. This was the Argent Legacy Gala, a first in the brand's history, and it bore her fingerprints in every corner. The invitation list was as tight as a jeweler's clasp. Every influential name in Austin's high-end social scene accounted for, except one. She'd written the guest list with the same discipline she used for investment portfolios. Politicians' wives, gallery owners, boutique hotel magnates, even Chloe's favorite lifestyle influencer, all present. But there was no cream-colored envelope for Chloe Hart. Not that Evelyn needed to hide the omission. In these circles, absence could be louder than attendance. The guests arrived in gowns that whispered against the marble floor, in tuxedos cut with impeccable lines. As they stepped into the ballroom, they were met with a signature wave of fragrance. Heritage Luxe, Evelyn's first full campaign as Argent's face. Staff in black gloves handed champagne flutes with pearls of condensation sliding down the glass. Near the stage, the brand's new advertising images stood on towering panels. Evelyn in cream silk, the diamond brooch glinting, the Maison Argent bottle balanced in her hand like a scepter. Throughout the evening, cameras flashed. Social media lit up with tagged photos. An unforgettable night with the one and only hashtag Evelyn Hart. Argent knows how to treat a guest. This woman is luxury. Evelyn's name trended locally by the end of the first hour. Each guest left with a weighty black gift bag embossed with the Argent crest. Inside, a velvet box containing an exclusive not-for-sale fragrance, one that would never reach Chloe's hands. The scent was intoxicating, with base notes of oud and amber that lingered long after the last sip of champagne. "I've never smelled anything like it," murmured the art museum director to her husband as they lingered near the dessert table. Evelyn heard, smiled faintly, and floated away to greet another cluster of guests. By midnight, the online coverage had cemented the event's success. The Society column called it a masterclass in elegance and influence. Photos showed Evelyn surrounded by the city's elite, the word reinvention appearing in 3 separate headlines. Chloe's absence wasn't mentioned outright, but it was visible. A gap in the narrative only she would notice. The next morning, Evelyn's inbox held a single unread email. The subject line, "I owe you an apology." She opened it slowly, sipping her coffee, the scent of last night's signature perfume still clinging to her silk robe. Paragraph after paragraph spilled Chloe's regret. Her thoughtless words, her misunderstood humor, her wish to move forward. Evelyn read it all without the faintest change in expression. She set the mug down, fingers hovering over the keyboard. This reply would not be rushed. The cursor blinked at the end of Chloe's last paragraph like it was daring Evelyn to hit delete. She didn't. Not yet. She read the apology again, tasting each carefully chosen word the way a sommelier rolls wine across the tongue, noting the sweetness of regret, the acid of self-preservation. Forgiveness? That could be given in a single breath. But access? Access was currency, and she never gave that away for free. Her fingers moved over the keys with the calm precision of someone signing a merger agreement, not replying to family drama. "Chloe," she typed, "I appreciate your reaching out. I believe we can put the unpleasantness behind us. As it happens, Argent has a small advisory committee for community outreach. There is an opening. It is unpaid, but offers an opportunity to contribute meaningfully to the brand's vision." She paused, considering the next line like a chess player setting up a trap. "If you are interested, I can have my assistant send over the details." She ended it with a perfectly cordial, "Warm regards, Evelyn." No flourish, no apology in return. She hit send. The reply came back within 20 minutes, quicker than a sales clerk rushing to wrap a limited edition handbag. "Yes, I'd be honored," Chloe wrote, the subtext practically screaming. "Anything to get back in the room." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, the morning light pouring across her study. The silver-framed photograph of her late husband caught the glow, and she imagined him smirking at the game being played. The advisory role was, in truth, a ghost position. Chloe's first assignment was to review potential outreach venues, a task that meant scrolling through lists of community centers and jotting down notes that no one would read. Evelyn sent polite check-in emails once a month, always with phrases like, "Take your time," and "No rush on this." Chloe, to her credit, responded with paragraphs of input, attaching photos, links, and bullet points. Evelyn skimmed them only enough to confirm that they were harmless, then forwarded them to Marta with a single-line note. File under decorative effort. At the quarterly board meeting Chloe attended virtually, her video square neatly muted and ignored. The real discussion happened in Evelyn's living room the night before, over a decanter of Chateau Margaux, with the board's most influential members. When the meeting adjourned, no one referenced Chloe's work. No one even glanced at her screen. Evelyn didn't need to orchestrate the snub. Power simply flowed around Chloe like a stream diverting around a rock. Weeks turned into months. Evelyn's control over Argent solidified. New campaigns launched, exclusive partnerships formed, and Chloe's presence faded into the quiet background where Evelyn intended her to stay. The city's elite still spoke of the gala, still tagged Evelyn in their posts, still wore the new scents she had personally approved. Chloe's name was never mentioned in those circles, except in whispers about how she used to be everywhere. One evening, as Evelyn was finishing a glass of wine on her terrace, her phone buzzed. Marta's name lit the screen. "Tell me you're in the mood for a little legacy planning," Marta said, her voice rich with the satisfaction of having found something valuable. Evelyn set down her glass. "What have you got?" "There's a clause in your will we can amend. One that will make sure, no matter what happens, Chloe will never so much as sniff at Argent ownership." Evelyn smiled slowly, the city lights flickering in the distance. "Send me the paperwork." The ink would dry on more than just a will. It would seal a dynasty. Some people lock their jewels in safes. Evelyn locked her empire in ink. The conference table in Marta's private office gleamed under the warm lamplight. The documents before Evelyn were thick, their embossed headers whispering permanence. Marta's manicured finger rested on the page that mattered most. "This clause ensures your Argent shares bypass any personal heirs," Marta explained, her tone clipped with satisfaction. "Instead, they'll transfer to the Hart Cultural Foundation, also under your control until your passing. Evelyn's pen felt heavy in her hand, but the weight was satisfying. 1. Signature, and Chloe's dreams of ever laying a hand or a wrist on Argent's ownership would dissolve permanently. The pen scratched across the paper, the sound soft but absolute. Explicit exclusion? Evelyn asked, though she already knew the answer. Marta slid over another page. In legal black and white, the language was unmistakable. Chloe Hart is to have no ownership rights, inheritance claims, or voting influence over Maison Argent or its subsidiaries. Just the way I like it, Evelyn murmured. She signed again. The legal notice was delivered to Ryan 2 days later. Evelyn chose not to soften the blow. The envelope was embossed, formal, impossible to mistake for anything but official business. When Ryan called, his voice was measured. "Mom, you really didn't have to—" "I did," Evelyn interrupted. "And I did it for you as much as for me." He sighed, the sound of a man caught between two women's storms. "She's going to be furious." "She already is," Evelyn said before hanging up. She imagined the moment Chloe would hear, the tight smile dissolving, the sharp intake of breath before words came out too fast, too loud. That vision became reality one evening when Ryan called again. The faint murmur of Chloe's voice could be heard in the background. No, not murmuring, spitting. "She's saying you're trying to humiliate her," Ryan said. Evelyn's reply was even. "I'm trying to ensure she can never humiliate me or you through Argent." There was no comeback for that. The weekend after, Evelyn attended an Argent charity soiree at the Driscoll Hotel. The ballroom was awash in warm gold lighting and the scent of the new Luxe Heritage blend, her creation, her mark. She wore deep emerald silk, the kind of color that photographs like power. Cameras found her naturally, guests gravitated toward her. She accepted compliments with a gracious smile, her diamond drop earrings catching every flash. If Chloe had been in the room, she would have seen the proof. Evelyn had not only kept her seat at the table, she'd had the table moved to her liking. 2 days later, Marta called with an update Evelyn already suspected. "She tried to buy in," Marta said, unable to hide her amusement. "Approached a secondary investor with an offer, well below market value, by the way." "And?" Evelyn asked, swirling the amber in her crystal glass. "They told her no." "Politely, but firmly. The bylaws you approved last month give you final say on all shareholder changes. She can't get around you." Evelyn smiled, her reflection in the glass clear and calm. "Then the wall is built." Outside her control, Chloe wasn't just locked out. She was staring at a door that would never open. Power didn't always announce itself with a bang. Sometimes it was a pen scratching across paper, a vote cast in a quiet boardroom while the city hummed outside. Evelyn had learned long ago that if you built the wall high enough on the first try, you never had to rebuild it. The quarterly Maison Argent board meeting was held in a glass-walled conference room overlooking downtown Austin. The skyline glittered in the late afternoon sun, and every detail in the room, from the polished walnut table to the silver trays of espresso, spoke of precision and status. Evelyn sat at the head of the table. Across from her, the younger investors shifted in their seats as the next agenda item flashed on the screen. Proposal to add Chloe Hart to the board of directors. The CEO, who had learned to read Evelyn's expressions like a weather report, barely looked at Chloe's name before glancing at her for direction. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't need to. When the time came, her voice was smooth, almost cordial. "I vote no." Majority shareholder prerogative. The gavel of silence hit the table. One by one, the other investors echoed her sentiment, falling in line with the authority she wielded. Chloe's name disappeared from the slide as if it had never been there. After the meeting, Evelyn stayed behind with Marta to finalize a set of amendments to the corporate bylaws. The language was airtight. No family members of current shareholders may be added to the board without unanimous consent. That should do it, Marta said, sliding the papers toward her. It will do more than that, Evelyn replied. It will keep her outside the room forever. The scent of fresh espresso mingled with the faint tang of leather chairs, but Evelyn didn't linger. She had locked the door and thrown away the key. The news reached Chloe by the end of the week. At first, she tried charm, an airy message in the family group chat about misunderstandings and opportunities to collaborate. Evelyn didn't reply. Then came the indirect jabs on social media. Inspirational quotes about closed doors leading to better ones. When that failed, Chloe made calls to two of Argent's smaller investors, trying to stir sympathy. Both politely deflected, one even warning Evelyn afterward. "They're not just with you," he told her over the phone. "They're afraid of being against you." Evelyn didn't mind fear. It kept the edges sharp. By the second month, Chloe's efforts had gone from strategic to desperate. A thinly veiled blog post about age-blocking innovation appeared online, the perfume world's version of a tantrum. Evelyn didn't engage. She didn't need to. Her silence was more cutting than rebuttal. Ryan, meanwhile, hovered on the sidelines like a man watching a storm from behind glass. At a family dinner, he quietly admitted, I can't take sides here, Mom." "You don't have to," Evelyn told him. "The decision's already been made." The final act of this chapter required no meeting, no speech, no public display. It was an act so simple it was almost cruel in its elegance. From her study, with its dark bookshelves and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock, Evelyn pulled out a box. Inside was a single bottle of the discontinued Argent scent, Chloe's scent. The one Evelyn had phased out months ago. The glass caught the light in a way that almost made it look full of molten gold. She slipped it into tissue paper, the kind that crinkled like whispers, and nestled it in a pristine white gift box embossed with the Maison Argent logo. Then she wrote the note in her own hand, each letter deliberate. The last one, enjoy it while it lasts. The courier picked it up the next morning. Evelyn imagined Chloe opening it, her hands trembling not with gratitude, but with the bitter knowledge that this was a finality she couldn't undo. Somewhere across town, Chloe's fingers closed around the bottle, reading the note twice before she understood that this wasn't a gift. It was a gravestone. The first time Chloe used the bottle, she didn't spray it on her wrists like before. She cupped her palm over the nozzle, letting the mist fall in a trembling halo, as if afraid too much would vanish into the air. Each drop had become currency, scarce, precious, and painfully finite. The fragrance clung to her like a ghost of who she had once been, but the cruel irony was that it no longer belonged to her. The moment the scent reached anyone else's nose, they smiled. Not in recognition of Chloe, but of Evelyn Hart, the elegant face of Maison Argent's Heritage Luxe campaign. At a friend's dinner party, Chloe arrived wearing her treasured scent, the one Evelyn had discontinued. She lingered in the doorway, waiting for the usual compliments. Instead, a woman leaned toward another guest and whispered, "That's the Evelyn Hart perfume. I adore it." The words landed like ice water down Chloe's back. She smiled through clenched teeth, pretending not to hear. But inside, something wilted. The scent she had worn as her signature for years now carried someone else's name. While Chloe's identity withered, Evelyn's presence seemed only to grow richer. Her calendar was a tapestry of charity galas, art show openings, and private wine tastings. She was photographed in chic silk jackets and understated diamonds, her silver hair swept back, like it belonged on the cover of Town and Country. Business-wise, Maison Argent's market share was up, and Evelyn's other investments flourished. Socially, she was untouchable. her name spoken with admiration in rooms Chloe no longer entered. The shift was subtle, but irreversible. Chloe's invitations slowed, then stopped. The women she used to meet for lunch were now too busy, though they always seemed to have time for Evelyn's gatherings. The only constant was Ryan, who insisted on keeping the family brunch tradition alive. But even there, the balance had changed. Evelyn would arrive with small, thoughtful gifts for the hosts, while Chloe's once envied outfits seemed to fade into the background. One Sunday, as Evelyn reached for her tea, Chloe caught the faintest whiff of Heritage Luxe. It wasn't from her. It was from Evelyn herself. Evelyn never gloated aloud. She didn't have to. In her mind, there was no guilt, only the quiet satisfaction of a wrong answered with precision. Chloe's remark, "You smell like poverty," had been filed, not forgotten, and answered in a way no one could mistake. At dinner one evening, Marta lifted her champagne flute and offered a toast. "To victory," she said, eyes glittering, in velvet gloves. Evelyn smiled. "The only way worth winning." Chloe, meanwhile, rationed her perfume like wartime sugar. The bottle, once displayed proudly on her vanity, was now tucked in a drawer, hidden away like a secret weakness. Each spray was measured against the knowledge that one day soon there would be none left. By late autumn, the bottle was light in her hand. She tilted it toward the light, seeing the last golden remnant cling to the glass. She couldn't bring herself to finish it, as if that final spray would erase the last thread of the life she thought she had built. And then came the quarterly Maison Argent report. It arrived in elegant cream envelopes to every shareholder, but it was the news outlets that carried the headline Chloe couldn't avoid. Maison Argent posts, record-high sales figures. Evelyn sat in her study, the report resting under her hand like a well-earned prize, wondering how she might make the next quarter even better. The boutique window glittered like a jewel box under the Texas sun, each pane polished so clean it seemed to hum with pride. Front and center, framed by delicate strands of gold ribbon, was the campaign shot that had cemented Evelyn Hart's transformation from quiet investor to the face of Heritage Luxe. She stood there in that photograph as she did in life now, poised, unbothered, and utterly in command. On the sidewalk, passers-by slowed to admire the display. A young woman in a silk blouse leaned close to the glass, smiling. "That's her," she whispered to a friend. "The woman who owns Maison Argent? She's everything." Evelyn didn't pause to acknowledge them. She didn't need to. The glass already carried her reflection beside the portrait, blending the present with the legacy she had built. Inside, the air was cool and saturated with scent, amber, rose, and something darker underneath, a whisper of musk that lingered like a promise. At the tester counter, shoppers spritzed the crystal bottle she had personally approved. She watched one woman lift her wrist, eyes fluttering shut as she inhaled. "That's reverence number 3, the sales associate said. "A personal favorite of Mrs. Hart herself." Evelyn almost smiled at the phrasing. Not the company owner, not the campaign star, Mrs. Hart herself. Ownership had a scent now, and it was hers. Her heels clicked softly against the marble as she left the store and stepped back into the sunshine. Austin was alive with weekend chatter, restaurant patios clinking with brunch glasses, street musicians tuning guitars, but Evelyn's mind was elsewhere, drifting back to that Sunday brunch months ago. "You smell like poverty." The words had been meant to sting, to draw blood in front of an audience. Instead, they had planted the seed of an empire. She hadn't just answered Chloe's insult, she had made it irrelevant, rewritten the social script so thoroughly that the past felt like another life. As she crossed the street, she spotted her daughter-in-law. Chloe was walking toward her, phone pressed to her ear, a bright shopping bag swinging at her side. She looked up, caught sight of Evelyn. and in the split second before turning her head, there was a flicker, a mixture of recognition, resentment, and something else Evelyn knew well: surrender. They passed within arm's reach, the faint trace of the discontinued perfume trailing behind Chloe. Once, that scent had been her crown. Now it smelled faint, like a ghost trying to keep its place in the living world. Evelyn didn't slow. A few steps later, she paused outside a corner cafe and drew a deep breath. The air was heavy with the fragrance she now controlled, notes of bergamot and vanilla drifting from a woman who walked by wearing heritage luxe. It wasn't just perfume anymore. It was proof. Proof that ownership could be as intoxicating as any luxury, that a single calculated move could shift the center of gravity in a family, in a social circle, in a city. She had turned an insult into a brand into a throne, and a throne into a stage from which she could choose when and if to offer mercy. The thought warmed her as much as the Texas sun. She adjusted her silk scarf, its pattern echoing the Maison Argent logo, and continued down the street. Somewhere in the distance, the boutique door chimed as another customer stepped inside to claim a little piece of the empire Evelyn had built. Marta's words from weeks ago came back to her. Victory in velvet gloves. She had worn them well. At the next crosswalk, Evelyn stopped, her eyes catching on her own reflection in a shop's mirrored panel. She looked exactly as she wanted to be remembered, elegant, untouchable, and entirely self-made. She thought of the countless women who would spray one of her fragrances in the morning without knowing her story. And she thought of the one woman who would never again spray it without remembering exactly who had taken it from her. Evelyn's lips curved into a faint, satisfied smile. She inhaled, the familiar, layered scent wrapping around her like a second skin, and whispered, "Power, my dear, is the finest perfume.